Pretty sure everything else just for educational purposes only is not intended as financial advice. If you thought yesterday was bearish, here's today. And we're even lower. We're on 90.4 on spot prices. I assume futures are in backwardation at this point. It's kind of like a toddler having a temper tantrum. Just got to let it do its thing. Let the people sell, let the tourists sell. Really nothing good to say here, though. Not a div yet on RSI, at least. We do have a div on volume. This is a lower low in price, lower low in price on less volume. So that is technically a volume div. But it very much feels like the selling will continue until morale improves. There's a yearly pivot at 80. The cloud's at like 85. It's just, the question is what's going to snap BTC out of it. BTC is actually down more on the day than even ETH and Sol. MSTR had some people upset with me. They called the video unhinged yesterday, that I was encouraging trades in risky products. Well, I encourage people to not listen to anything I say and to just take anything I show you as a data point, and then you make your own decision. We do have a second lower doji today. Not ideal after the doji on Friday, and based on where BTC's headed overnight, MSTR almost certainly will open lower. At some point, div candlesticks something would be quite helpful here to turn this puppy around. So it's certainly a little early to expect any hope, but it's down, I think, 60% just from July? Probably a little stretched. Probably just a little bit stretched. And here's MSTX again with a lower low. Second doji. If we can get a third doji on the daily tomorrow, then I'll add. I did buy a little bit. I bought a tiny bit. Nobody should take anything I say as investment advice, but I did buy a little bit of MSTX, ETH, and Sol T last night. We'll see how it looks tomorrow into Wednesday, and it is a lower low on less volume. So if we're grasping at straws here, we do have that on our side. ETH still looks okay here. It knows that my stop loss is at 3K, and it's just holding there. I fully expect this to break through. I mean, just look at the market, right? Especially with the legacy charts I'm about to show. It doesn't feel like we have any fight left in us at this point, but this is a bullish divergence on RSI for the moment. On ETH, this is the pay attention closely area at 3,800. Down here is just guessing. Everything here is guessing. Maybe we go to 2,500. Maybe you have bids at 2,500 on BTC. Maybe you have bids at 85, right? Like, it's really hard to say because it just feels like there's no buyers at the moment. This is BMNR. No div on the 4-hour. That's where I'd watch this. Hasn't been above the 4-hour cloud since early October. Failed pattern, by the way. Can't expect this to be bullish if ETH isn't bullish. So if and when ETH does pull up, which could be a 25, could be a 3K, maybe BMNR shows some life, but that certainly isn't the expectation here. And here's Solana. It actually broke the div today, did hit a lower low, did hit that 130 area, and again, just doesn't feel like prices are going to go anywhere higher. And I don't know what it's going to take catalyst-wise, because if we look at the calendar, Fed speak, a bunch of delayed data. Like, what do we have this week that's going to pull us out of this? I don't know. And again, with the legacy charts I'm about to show on the technicals, just doesn't look like things want to go up at the moment. This is what really shifted the gears in the market when we went from a cut to a hold. Now, there's no meeting in November, so we got a month to figure it out. And it's basically 50-50. The issue is we do have trueflation rising ever so slowly here. It's been volatile and rising for a little while. And you could say this is some tariff effects. You could say it's temporary, transitory, dare we say. But it doesn't help your case if you're a dove and inflation looks like that. The doves will say that they're more worried about unemployment, which we don't officially have numbers on yet. So it's hard to really know. It's hard to really know until you have the data, at least the government data. In the government nowcast, numbers are flirting with the 3 handle here. Not what you want to see across the board as we get this data slowly coming back out again. It's just hard to see a near-term catalyst. GDP looks great. GDP looks hot, right? At 4.1, super hot. This is the top part of the K, clearly. And this is for Q3, so we don't even have Q4 yet as far as early estimates. But this is another data point to watch for when eventually we get the Q3 number into Q4. What does the Q4 look like? it just based on my eyes looks positive, right? We're going from roughly 3.8 at the end of October to 4.1, if that's how this works on the calculations. So it looks okay overall going into Q4, but maybe not as strong as Q3. At least on the inflation front, gas prices have been literally flat all year, 308. No seasonal effects, no nothing across the year. So we do have that on our side. Reverse repo, liquidity-wise, also the lowest it's been in years. Hasn't been this low in years, continues to just run on fumes here. And it's almost like we're going to need a liquidity event to pull us out of this. It's like rooting for the meteor, because that's not a happy event when it happens. But I don't see what else would pull us out of this other than just terrible jobs numbers. Jobs numbers are so bad that everyone's just like, okay, all right, fine, we got to cut. Other than a liquidity event and jobs numbers pulling us out of this, I don't know what does. Here's the unemployment rate. We don't have the October unemployment rate, and we will never get the October unemployment rate. But currently at 4.3, yield curve, which people have sort of forgotten about, is still uninverted and it's kind of flat. Really nothing happening for a little while there. And this also really isn't screaming anything. Just a lot of uncertainty about all of the data integrity. What are we going to see? When are we going to see it? What is it going to mean? If you like the past 2 years, you're going to love the next 6 months. More of the same. And by the way, we have a new Fed chair coming who may or may not be super dovish. So you can hold out for that as a catalyst, but we go to 75 on BTC in the near term, waiting for that, right? But at this rate, we're losing like 3% a day. On the bond complex, I still like anything but TLT, just on a 3-day. All this stuff looks okay. None of the charts I have look necessarily amazing, but these aren't really to get some crazy moves out of them. They're just to be somewhere else when the risk off move happens. It's to shield yourself from a risk off move. Dixie looks fine. DXY, right? Not impressive, but it's above the cloud. Can't say that for most risk assets that people have been trading. This can go nowhere and just stall out, but the longer it holds up here, the higher the likelihood it's going to try to move above 100. And now as we get into the equity charts, these are still trending higher. They have trended higher since April. They've done really, really well. The question really is, do you have any confidence, high conviction, that there's something to do here? I don't. Maybe you get a bearish TK across. Maybe this whole thing's a head and shoulders. Maybe this goes through the cloud, right? Or maybe it just goes flat and does nothing. But it doesn't really look like it's setting up for anything. Now, RSP, equal weight, S&P, looks like a head and shoulders all day. This looks like it's ready to break down any minute here, sub 180. Not exactly a screaming endorsement for a long. Same thing with the Qs. Holding up okay, but what's really holding this up is like Nvidia and Google and Apple and maybe Tesla. Not a lot going on under the hood past that. So this isn't bearish. It's just, what do you do here? I don't have any great ideas. QQQE, this is equal weighted QQQ. Also head and shoulders all day. Does not look happy to be here. Looks ready to break down. Looks ready to give some back after kind of failing to go anywhere. DJI also reversed, much like Microsoft, much like Nvidia might after earnings. This whole move up here is way different than where we were in June, July. In June, July, at least you had a pattern, you had a fresh cloud breakout, all the tariff stuff was done, and now we're post that move on everything. And it gets worse for IWM because IWM does have the bearish TK cross on the daily, and it's already in the cloud. And this is ETH, right? This is a high correlation to ETH. SMH also, you tell me, head and shoulders? No? At least over here, even when it was flirting with a head and shoulders, it gave you a go sign at a higher high on the right shoulder. So it just doesn't look like much of anything here. Mag 7, same deal. All these charts look the same. They're all sort of being pushed higher by the highest market cap names. Starting from worst to best, Meta still looks like it's just absolutely in the dumpster. It looks like BTC, right? It just looks ready for lows. Netflix had a split today, also looks fairly bearish. Microsoft failed reversal, failed bullish breakout actually, reversed, just doesn't look great. Tesla, Amazon kind of hanging in there. Amazon still looks fine, I think, as a long-term idea, as does Tesla. Google, Apple, still pushing everything up. And then there's Nvidia that just sitting here we'll see what earnings brings. I can't imagine they miss or earnings are bad. If anything, earnings just slow down. I don't think this is setting up necessarily for anything. It just, again, there's nothing to do here, just a bunch of uncertainty. And some of the other high-flying names, Oklo, Head & Shoulders breaking down below the cloud, Galaxy breaking down below the cloud, just barely almost grazed the measured move target. It's always tough to take a measured move on a diagonal, but it did get close. This was the earnings day, by the way, I think. Crazy earnings that it had, and then reversed just straight down after that. At least with Oklo, it did get in the zone. This is why whenever I measure these, it's always best to take something off. I usually take 25% off at the 1618 minimum, and then wait for the trailing stop loss to hit me. Hood, double top through the cloud, and all these have had a great run, right? This is basically tripled since breaking out in May, and this is why, right? You see enough of these over time. It might take a year, 3 years, it might take a decade to get there with any system and say, okay, I've seen this before. I know what could happen. So I'm going to do XYZ on positioning. So the next trade to take here for me would be back above the cloud, which that might be months, right? Might be a year. I don't know. Reddit, same deal. Breaking down, still looks like a Head & Shoulders, still looks ready for lows. Doesn't look happy to be here. Palantir has a almost probably year long actually at this point, bear div on the weekly. Somebody tell Alex Karp, because this also doesn't look super, super happy to be here at this point. Now you can div out for a long time. A year on an equity is quite a long time. So for me, if I was sitting in this with heavy profits, like many people are on big tech, that would push me into the, okay, it's fine to take some off here. You've got Michael Burry short, probably. You've got a bunch of the other tech leaders selling their NVIDIA stash or selling their whatever stash, SoftBank, Peter Thiel. Not that that's enough to push us lower, but I think a lot of people just made a lot of money. Now it's time to just take some back price-wise. A few setups left, the usual 5 or 6. Rivian, I think still looks fine. I don't love that it failed the breakout and is back in the range. Same rules apply. Anything below 12 and I'm out. It's going to be sad if that happens. Been in this trade since January, waiting. Still looks good. Still looks fine. It's just, market's going to market, right? Welcome to breakout trading. Lucid is in div territory. No div yet. It's out of the downward channel, way below the cloud. None of this is bullish, but I would watch for a div on this if we get any extreme lower lows. Zoom also still in the waiting room here. No pun intended. Anything above 90 should be good to go. Roku still looks fine. Check back on the breakout there. Lyft, same deal. I'd rather take a shot at charts that look like this than try to force something on NVIDIA or Google or Apple or Netflix just based on technicals. Figs also still looks fine. No issues. I think it's got plenty of room. Nothing really challenging this move higher yet. And on the quantum stuff, Rigetti below the cloud, Qubit below the cloud, IONQ below the cloud, and Qubits also starting to get below the cloud. So this is also where people get into trouble because they look at something like MSTR and they say, oh my God, have you seen what happened? Did you see what happened in 2024? Right? They're like, this is a steal. And they kind of don't read the room a little, and it's not the time, It's not a value judgment on MSTR. It's not that I think MSTR is going to zero or their stash is going to crash the market. It's just read the room, right? Clearly, it's probably not the best time to be mega long leveraged BTC when we're going heavily in the opposite direction. So overall, still favors risk off, still favors bonds and dollar based on technicals. That's all I got for this one. Give me a like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.